Howdy, howdy, fellow movie watchers, and welcome back for another edition of the Wisco Movie Watchers Podcast, brought to you by PTE Creative. As always, we're your hosts, Kevin Davies and Dylan Davies. Now, today we are starting a year-long project here on the show that we hope you guys enjoy, and it's something that is incredibly challenging. You think it wouldn't be from the name of it, but it's incredibly challenging. Dylan, what are we starting today?
So we're doing a top 100 list, personal top 100. This is something I've done periodically since 2015.
It's true.
Um, yeah. So pretty much it's a way to gauge your barometer of like how much do you agree with your host. Pretty much.
Yeah, it's it's a personal top 100 list. We are not ranking the top 100 films of all time per whatever source you may choose.
Yeah.
It's also important to note in this is the way it should be done. And it's not because it's the way we're doing it, it's because this is honest. The vast majority of times you find an article about the top 25 movies of all time, the top 10 movies of all time, even the top 100, top 150. The vast majority of people that put those lists together haven't seen half those movies. And you can tell just by reading the blurbs about it, because there's nothing new, interesting, or personal about it. It's just Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. One of the coolest reveals and twists in movie history happens in this. And you're like, well, no shit. Cool.
Yeah. It's not 100 best movies of all time. It's just 100 favorite.
Yeah, and you're going to see a lot of quality on this, but then you're also going to see some movies that you're like, huh, didn't see that one coming. So that is how we are going to be doing our list.
And one more caveat is you and I do it a little different. I've always done it where I make franchises as one slot.
Yeah.
Just so I'm not taking up like, 3 different slots with, Harry Potter's or something.
Sure. And
So
I am the polar opposite.
Yeah, I always just count that as one.
For me, if the movie distinguishes itself, it's on. There may be a franchise that franchise is a loose term with the one I'm thinking about that may or may not have a lot of appearances on this list. So we're gonna get into it right away. And we're gonna trade back and forth, 199, so forth. And so today is going to be movie 100 through movie 91. So it should be.
Did you have any honorable mentions that you had down?
So I saved I saved all of my honorable mentions for our December show, because that's how we're gonna space this boy. We're gonna save this bad boy out. Plus, that seems a little bit more for the giving season, giving some movies that just barely missed the cut a little bit of attention.
Okay.
So we're going to be doing this throughout the year. The month of November is going to be our final show when we're going to do our top 5. October is going to see 6 through 10, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be a fun time in January to start. This is one of our big goals, our New Year's resolutions for the show is this show. So we're going to get started. Would you like the honors, or should I go right ahead to take number 100?
I'll go first, I guess.
Go for it.
So my number 100 is a movie literally everyone probably has seen. Everyone knows it. It's one of the most successful movies of all time. It's Titanic.
Wow, that's a fall for that movie from what I remember of your youth.
I mean, I do love that movie. Yeah, what I should have done is look up like that one compared to my prior list, like what it peaked at. Should have looked back on the years and see like, okay, how high was it at one point? Because I'm sure a lot of these were much higher at some point.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of those throughout my list as well.
Yeah. I mean, what can you say about Titanic that people already don't know? Like, great cast. I mean, absolutely great chemistry between the leads. Like Leo and Kate have like arguably the best chemistry between like modern two leads.
They just get it. They get it with each other. They should be doing more together because their chemistry is so good.
And like, just as two people in the world, not outside of movies, like they seem to actually genuinely like each other just as friends, so
Yeah.
that really helps. Yeah, I mean, it's James Cameron is a perfectionist, and I think that really helps with this movie. Like,
It allows you
uh,
to believe in
the
the
production
story.
design in that movie is like absolutely insane.
Yes.
Like, it is such a beautiful movie to look at, and it doesn't get enough credit for what it does in terms of like visual effects. It did win the visual effects Oscar, which is nice to see.
Yeah.
But like, it is actually like revolutionary, groundbreaking in terms of what all
Yes.
it does.
Very much so.
So yeah, I mean, one of the most successful movies of all time.
I think the most interesting about it is it's essentially two movies.
Pretty
That's
much,
really
yeah,
what it is. It's the rise of a love story that happens to be on a boat, and the
yeah.
fall of a love story that
I
happens to be
mean,
on a boat. That's
yeah, that the last like hour is just pure action, pretty much.
and it's interesting to watch, especially through the lens of that. If you know James Cameron, it's interesting to watch that movie because you just go, God damn it! I mean, there's a method to his madness. I might not always agree with it, or might not always find it appealing, but can't say he doesn't make good movies.
Yeah, I mean that last hour is like 100% like spectacle.
Yeah.
And it looks amazing.
Oh, it does. It certainly does. I'll transition to another movie with some spectacle to it, not nearly at the level of Titanic, though. Going to the year 2014, made $370.5 million at the box office. Number 20 of that year. Should have been higher. Going with Edge of Tomorrow, starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt.
Great movie.
I did write a personal blurb about each one, and then I'll just kind of talk about it generally. Phenomenal sci-fi action film that is criminally underrated due to its horrendous marketing campaign. Tom
Oh
Cruise and
yeah.
Emily Blunt are fucking incredible. That was my little blurb for it. This movie is
Real quick,
criminally underrated.
is it still called Edge of Tomorrow,
Yes.
or is it officially
Live, Die, Repeat.
Live Die Repeat? Yeah, like what is? I
This movie
never
had
like.
like three different titles, and
Yeah,
I remember this was so frustrating and vexing because this was at the height of me getting into, at the time, AMC Movie Talk, which then transitioned into Collider, when Collider was doing a lot of movie talk stuff. They did a really good job. They hired real critics and real people to come do stuff with them. And they would just bash the shit out of the marketing campaign of this movie because someone on staff had read the book that this was based off of, and they're like, this is a really cool project. This doesn't seem to work at all. And then they had a really weird kind of synth, this is not the end, like song to market the
yeah,
movie. It was so strange. And then they kept saying live, die, repeat, which was, I think, the slogan for the movie, but they kept saying it so much it felt like the name of the movie. And no one knew what the fuck the movie was actually called half the time. And I remember going into this, in the theater, just going like, I don't know, I'll give it a shot. And I was
yeah.
floored at how good it was, but I could just tell by the people in the theater with me, I was like, this movie's not going to do well. It's just not
Yeah,
going to
it
do
didn't
what it
help
should.
that. It didn't help that I think the same year Oblivion came out. It's like
I think Oblivion was the year before, but I could be wrong. It's close
yeah,
within range
and
anyway.
that's like another sci-fi Tom Cruise movie. It's like pretty lackluster.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it, but it's not great. But Edge of Tomorrow is like definitely like a underrated movie.
It's criminally underrated. The sci-fi elements are incredibly fun. The easiest way to say it, if for those who don't know what Edge of Tomorrow is it's sci-fi Groundhog's Day with an alien war, and
Yeah,
it's super fun. You have peak Emily Blunt here, in my opinion, just kicking ass everywhere, and it's incredibly fun to see Tom Cruise get to play a character like this, where this at least explains why Tom Cruise eventually gets really badass at a character. Where Tom Cruise, you can always buy into the character that he plays because it's Tom Cruise. But it is fun to see him have to play a guy that has no business being in a battle, no business fighting, and he just has to keep reliving the same day over and over and over again. And that's how he becomes good at something. And it's logic. It's very much the Bill Murray with the piano teacher in Groundhog Day, where it's,
Yeah.
well, why are you a concert level pianist if this is your first lesson? It's like, oh, well, actually, I've been doing this for years in my head now. So, just an incredibly fun spectacle movie that I love to death. Great movie. Great movie. Take us
Yeah.
to 99.
My 99 is probably something that's on your list higher. It's Home Alone.
Didn't make my list.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, it's like the complete opposite of Titanic. It's just like down to earth, grounded comedy.
Oh, yeah.
Like Macaulay Culkin's amazing in the movie.
With a underrated John Williams score.
Oh yeah, it is definitely.
And it's only underrated because no one says that's as one of his best, and it's really good. It's just,
It is great.
it's not Raiders, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Superman, Jaws. So
Yeah,
if it's not in that like five, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it couldn't have been that good. It's like, no, he's just that good. That's insane.
yeah. And there's like it's just obvious why it's good. Like it's just fun. It's funny.
It's heartfelt.
It's fun. Yeah, it's fun to watch Joe Pesci just get set on fire and see Daniel Stern get like step on a bunch of fucking ornament. It's fun.
It's a perfect kids movie. It really
Yeah,
is, because it's one of those movies that everyone can enjoy, and they don't dumb it down for a kid.
yeah,
They just do it with language choices and things that a kid could find enjoyable. I knew how popular this movie was recently, actually, because I always knew it was popular in our age group. You know, our age group is the one that really grew up with that movie as a cornerstone. But it amazed me how many kids, when I would give them the shot to pick a movie on Disney Plus, they would just bookend Christmas for 5 months with Home Alone. They're like, I want to watch Home Alone, and if they wanted to switch it up, they went to Home Alone 2. I was just like,
yeah.
really? Like, this is. I was like, this is better than me having to fight because you guys want to watch Dance Moms, so I'll give you that. But it was just like wild that that was the movie they would pick a lot of the time, and I was just like, okay. And I get it, because as a kid, I used to just watch Home Alone and Home Alone 2 on repeat. And I loved Home Alone 3 before I realized it's not that good of a movie. But
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah, that's probably the one I've seen the most.
yeah, well,
Honestly.
that's because that's what we owned on VHS when we were kids. We didn't own Home
Yeah.
Alone 1 or 2 forever, and I think I finally, with some Christmas money, I think I bought Home Alone 2. Because I was like, oh, I like the one in New York better, or whatever. So it's one of the few things about New York I like better than reality. So fun movie nonetheless, and a great musical score. Macaulay Culkin is so good, so good.
Also, like Kieran Culkin, underrated. He is so funny in that movie.
Well,
When they
apparently,
had,
I just read a story that they pitched that Kieran Culkin should follow that family for Home Alone 3, and he just felt like he couldn't live up to his brother's expectations. Like they were like gonna follow
yeah,
him,
I understand that.
and
Yeah,
so it's an interesting one to say the least.
I just love the cut to him where they say he wets the bed, and then it's just him like drinking a Pepsi,
Yeah,
smiling.
yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
It's certainly fun nonetheless. All right, 99 for me. I'm gonna go sequel territory here. I'm not someone who just thinks the original is better simply because it was the original. Jumanji: The Next Level, which is the second one with The Rock and Kevin Hart's 2019, 801.7 million at the box office. It was 10th the year of 2019. It was one of the last movies, possibly the last movie I saw in theaters pre-COVID. And I just remember being downtown Chicago with a couple friends, and great downtown AMC theaters down there. A lot of fun, but love the progression of emotionality and action in the franchise from the sequel. I love the self-doubt in many of the characters and the video game-like progression. If you want to talk about a movie that knows how to be a video game movie, it's a movie that's not even a video game. And it's Jumanji: The Next Level or Welcome to the Jungle. I just prefer The
Yeah,
Next Level because there's some progression and there's some more human emotion put in with a lot of different characters that I find to be quite enjoyable and fun.
I've only seen this one once. I thought it was like perfectly fine and enjoyable.
Yeah.
I really liked that first one though. Welcome to the Jungle. I've seen quite a few, and I really like it. Um,
I think it might be a scarcity issue, as I've seen Welcome to the Jungle more than I have Next Level. Welcome to the Jungle makes a lot more rounds on streaming than Next Level does. I like the fact that, to me, this is the way you reboot a franchise too. If you want to play in the same
yeah,
universe, because the original Jumanji with Robin Williams and company is a really fun movie from our childhood that I've always enjoyed that movie, right? I love the fact that they play in the same world, but outside of one tease, it's completely new and different. To me, that's how you reboot franchises. If you want to
yeah.
stay or you want to play in the same universe, do it this way. Honor the past, say, "Oh, see it happened." You're like, "Same thing." But same time, we can go forward with something else. And I think that's a great way to do it. I think this is, say what you will. Obviously, I don't think he's an Academy Award winning actor, but I like the range that The Rock gets to play in this, where he gets to play an interpretation of a nerd, or he gets to play an interpretation of a tough guy or an old man or whatever. It's just fun because when The Rock, when you actually watch him, is just silly. It's enjoyable. Do I think it's the greatest performance of all time? No. Kevin Hart is peak Kevin Hart here. I'm not usually a Kevin Hart movie watcher, but I prefer Kevin Hart and Jumanji. I think Karen Gillan is so good. So,
Yeah,
love that.
she's great in those movies.
And Jack Black's always so much fun in those movies as well. So, gotta say that. But that is my 99. Takes to 98.
Okay, my 98 is Star Trek '09.
Star Trek '09. Okay, the
I
reboot.
I really love this first one. Sequels are okay. They're kind of a letdown after this first one. Yeah, I wrote down the cast because it's like absolutely insane how many names are in it. Yeah, Chris Pine, Zoe Saldana, Zachary Quinto, Simon Pegg, Carl Urban, John Cho, Anton Yelchin before he passed, Eric Bana, and then a really underrated Bruce Greenwood.
And cameo by Chris Hemsworth.
True, Chris Hemsworth is in a little bit of it, like first like 3 minutes. It's like an absolutely stacked cast.
It's an
All return for the sequel.
it's an underrated stacked cast because of those names, I don't think anyone has really, outside of Chris Hemsworth, and I don't really see Chris Hemsworth as the guy. I see him as again, I always put everything kind of into sports parlance. He's not a wide receiver one. He's a wide receiver 1A, right?
Oh, Chris Pine's definitely a A-lister. Zoe
Yes,
Saldana is an A-list.
yes, but they're not like. Very rarely do they lead stuff alone. They usually have to have a
Well,
body
Zoe
around them to
Saldana,
sell.
it has a like high chance of winning an Oscar this year too. So
Okay, didn't know that. So that's
there's
good.
some Oscar buzz at least. So
Maybe she'll
yeah,
get
we'll
a
see about that
nomination.
one.
Maybe she'll get a nomination.
We'll see. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun. Oh, and you also have Leonard Nimoy returning as
Yes.
Spock. That's always fun. It's just a lot of fun. It's like it's kind of crazy because like uh the most recent Star Trek movie before this, I think, was like 2002, and then you jumped 7 years later, and then like the differentiation between like budget is absolutely insane, and how
Well,
much you can do with it.
it's important to note. I mean this with all due respect to Trekkies. Star Trek. What's the best way to say this? In terms of treatment for a movie, Star Trek was never really treated with that much respect.
Oh yeah,
From hey, we're gonna make a movie for these wide, big audiences. Obviously, when they make the first Star Trek movie and it's the reunion of the old cast and everything, I know that's a big deal. Obviously, Wrath of Khan is famous, but it's not as if it's like some huge blockbuster movie that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And then it's diminishing returns there, and then they kind of get a little jump back when they get the new generation cast. But again, it just feels like these are movies made for television plus.
Oh yeah, 100.
This is, I think, a perfect example of where the streaming world got its model for movies. They're not tippy top, but they're not made for TV movies.
Yeah.
They're in this odd middle ground in between.
Yeah, and it should be stated like this really doesn't feel like a Star Trek movie. Really, because it's like it's Star Trek has always been like more about like space exploration, like
Human
it's showing,
interaction, human
yeah, it's
relations, or
showing,
relations between
yeah,
people. Yeah.
not so much about like action. It feels more like a Star Wars movie than it does a Star Trek.
I mean, admittedly,
But
that's why people like myself that aren't Trekkies find this to be a great entry point into the franchise because it's fun
yeah,
and engaging.
and that and that's I think that's why they chose J.J. Abrams for Force Awakens. Like that's like a great like resume for him
Oh yeah.
is this first one. So yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It's beautiful to look at too. It's like a lot of gorgeous effects, and I think all the cast does a really good job of like falling to the original cast while also finding their own foot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
do appreciate that with them doing that. It's a fun movie, and again, it's a great entry point for people who might find Star Wars or Star Trek in enjoying, but you're not or
yeah,
enjoyable if you're not sure about it. Start with those, and then you could
yeah,
say, "Oh, well, we're gonna go deeper." And it's just Star Trek for many people is so hit or miss. I have
yeah.
one friend who's like a diehard Trekkie versus a Star Wars person, and I'll never understand half the time when he's talking why it's like so much better. I'm like, dude, all due respect to Star Trek, I can't. It's Star
I've
Wars
seen the
forever compared to Star
the
Trek.
original series. I've seen some of the Next Generation. I enjoy it, but I don't like. I'm not a diehard or thing. So
Fair
the only thing
enough.
I will say about this movie that I don't like, there's a lot of shaky cam, and I once saw the making of feature, and literally when they're on set, they have like the camera operator, and they'll have someone behind him literally hitting the camera, like literally physically hitting it to make it shake.
You don't need to
And
do
it's
that.
just like, what are you doing, J.J. Abrams?
Yeah, yeah, JJ, what are you doing with that choice? That doesn't make
But
sense.
whatever. I mean, it's his movie. He can do what he wants.
Exactly. We'll move to my number 98. I'm going to 1988, $238.1 million. We will be previewing this eventually, or reviewing this eventually as part of our big box office series. It's the number one of 1998, or 88, I should say. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Uh, a cartoon fan's
We'll be,
wet dream is in this movie, with a
yep.
perfect
I'll
amount
be
of adult
talking
theming.
about it in a little bit too.
Back to the Future team meets Walt Disney and Looney Tunes. Chef's
Yeah,
kiss.
it's great.
Oh, we'll
Bob
say
Hoskins is great.
yeah, we'll save it for when, since you have it in this group of 10. We'll save it for
Okay, yeah,
that's
sure.
fair.
My 97, we're also going to stay in 1988, is a movie I talked about in our 2024 review. Is a movie I just discovered this year called The Vanish. It's a horror movie. I don't even know if I'd call it a horror movie, actually. It's just like a suspense movie. Uh, Based on the title, you could probably guess what it's about. It's a guy and his girlfriend go to a like rest stop, and then his girlfriend goes missing, and then he's just driven mad by his disappearance. And then it's really odd because the structure is just like it doesn't follow the basic structure you would think it would about like a mystery of okay, let's try to solve what happened to her. They give you immediately pretty much who did it. Like they tell you from the start who did it, and you start following him his family life and everything. And somehow they still are able to build tension through that, which is really odd.
Yeah, it's an
It's
interesting way to
like
do it.
yeah, really admirable. And I mentioned this in the review that we did of 2024. Stanley Kubrick's called it the scariest movie I'd ever seen. And I like it sticks with you. And it has one of the like most terrifying
And this is a French film, right?
yeah, it's like so it's in French, but apparently I think the director's Dutch or the crew is Dutch or something. I don't know. Yeah, I would
Huh.
call it a French movie because all the actors are French.
So The Vanishing, 1988.
Yeah, it's great.
Alrighty. I mean,
It, that's
y-
one.
you sang its praises a lot on the 2024 review.
Yeah,
So
that's one of the movies that in years following I think could really, really like climb up my. Because I've only seen it once,
it's
and
important
I
to
don't
note,
want to
though.
watch it any time.
I feel like you and I do something similarly when if something we find in a movie really special, we tend to not watch it as much. We protect it because we want that. The Dark Knight
Yeah,
was that for years for me. I've sang its praises forever on the show, so everyone knows it's going to be in my top 100. But The Dark Knight, I would go years without watching, and I just be like, I don't want to, because I
yeah. Well, you
I
almost
remember the moment. I remember how it made
yeah,
me feel, and I want to protect
you
that.
almost want to you almost want to forget points of it. Then it feels fresh.
Yeah, and it's a very engaging thing. And I also love the fact he brought up that it's a movie that could climb. There are a few movies in this that I'm like, oh, really? They're not that high. And if I were to revisit this in a year's time, 5 years time, 10 years time, there's a few that I would be flabbergasted if they were still at that level and not higher. There's just a few of
Yeah,
those movies that
exactly.
happen. My 97, totally different vibe than yours. We're gonna go Dodgeball, a true underdog story from 2004.
Great movie.
168.4 million in the box office, 33rd that year. One of the first movies I ever went to a girlfriend with, or ever went to a movie with a girlfriend with. It's his interesting vibes nonetheless. It's just a great blend of sports and comedy, and there's so many quotable lines and endearing characters. Nobody makes me bleed my own blood.
Yeah.
Nobody.
I was gonna say Ben Stiller's so underrated in that movie. I don't like Ben Stiller, and somehow I like him in that.
I would tend to agree. I'm not usually a Ben Stiller guy, and I think he's brilliant in
He's
Dodgeball.
like that's an iconic character.
Also, one of the best lines ever for modern people is in this movie. It's a sad line, but it's a reflection of the times. I found that if you make goals, you may not reach it. So, if I never make a goal, then I'll never be disappointed. and
Yeah.
I remember like using that in jest a lot, just being like, "Well, what are your goals?" I'm like, "I don't have any goals," and I had them internally. I just
Yeah.
wouldn't express them
Yeah,
a
there's a
lot.
lot of like great iconic moments too where it's like the fuck you Chuck Norris
Yeah.
and like the Steve the Pirate, all that. It's all great.
Oh,
Justin Long also is great in it.
yeah. I talk about another guy I wish would do some more.
I know,
I've
right?
always liked Justin Long. I always wish he would break. I wish he could just get one break in like a bigger movie where we got to put him in more stuff. Yeah, I want him to work with the.
I don't remember the last thing I saw him in.
I know the last thing I saw him do, but I wasn't watching it yet, and I know he's in the new Goosebumps series with the reboot for Disney Plus.
Uh,
But I haven't watched it yet to say it's good or not. But it's interesting to say the least with that.
yeah, I think the last thing I saw him in was Us, which you're not going to see that on my top 100. Not an enjoyable watch.
All right, take us to 96.
My 96 is Inside Out.
Wow. Okay. First animation that we're really
Yeah,
seeing on your list.
This is definitely one that would have been higher on my list a couple years ago, but this is one that like I don't usually pick a movie because I love the message of it or anything, but I think it does have like a great message for kids. Like sadness is necessary. Like
It's a really emotionally intelligent film because
yes, exactly.
the entire time as a viewer, I think it's perfect what you said, that you don't usually pick a movie because of the message that it sends. In I've written blurbs for about the first 40 movies on my list at this point, and there was one or two that I've done so far that I went, and a great message where I went, not the reason I'm recommending this movie or saying I love it, but I do like the message behind it. And Inside Out has that because the entire time it makes the audience member more emotionally intelligent. Because the whole time, if you actually think about watching human beings, we should be, oh, Joy's perfect. We only want Joy.
Exactly.
But the
Yes.
entire time as an audience member, you go, I like Joy, but why is she being so unkind to Sadness?
Yeah.
And including her and making sure, and then you look at it and you're like, wait, I can't just have joy all the time. To have joy, I have to have sorrow or sadness. I have to have all
Yeah.
these different things. It's a really smart play.
Yeah. And it's like it's definitely one of the most creative Pixar movies in terms of like the whole construction of the world that they live in, like with the whole islands and like the big cavernous place where all the dead memories go and all
Oh
that.
god, that's heartbreaking to
Oh,
see.
Bing Bong. Oh, it's Bing Bong breaks my heart every time it falls down in.
Well, the thing is, Bing Bong also, again, it attacks in a good way. I'm not saying it attacks an audience member. It attacks the brain of an audience member because seeing Bing Bong go through that, you remember that one thing from childhood that you thought was lost for like 30 years. You just go, fuck. And you get sad
Yeah,
all over again because it's that, you're like, maybe it's something you never had that you always wanted. Maybe it's something that you had and you lost. Oh, it's heart wrenching when Bing Bong
yeah.
has to go.
And
Oh,
like
God.
and then like the the dream like film studio thing and all that. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Also, I love the stupid thing with the like fake perfect boyfriend thing where it's like I die for Riley.
Yeah.
That thing. I love that part.
Yeah. Again, it's Pixar, so it's very emotionally intelligent and
Yeah.
and enjoyable to say the least. Yeah, I love Inside Out is one that
Also,
I
great cast,
great cast.
great voices.
Also, they're all great voices, and most people would probably say that Sadness is the best cast. If you're actually like stereotyping, there has never been a greater casting for voice actor ever than Mindy Kaling has discussed.
Yeah, I think Amy Poehler is like overlooked.
Oh,
Like
always.
she gives so much depth. Like I don't. She doesn't get enough credit. I think Amy Poehler.
No,
She's
because
like an
the rest of the
underrated
cast is
actress.
because she's never done anything to break out of being what people see her as.
Exactly.
She doesn't have that movie or that, HBO style series where you just go, "Holy fuck. This woman can act." She's always been
Yeah.
doing comedies, SNL, things of that nature. She's never been and her movie catalog when she first kind of broke into movies a little bit more
Yeah.
as
Not great.
a leading character was not good. And
Oh yeah.
we're not appealing to virtually anybody. So, but anytime I see Amy Poehler pop up, I'm usually excited because I
Yeah.
know it's going to be a
I
fun
mean,
little bit part.
she is great in Mean Girls.
Mean Girl, she's great. My actual favorite, again, it's a favorite in our house. One of my wife's favorite, if not her favorite show of all time, is probably Broad City. And
I have
it's a great show actually, because I remember when Ab first described it to me, I went, God, why am I doing this? But I fell in love with the show too. I'm not like her where I can't watch it obsessively, but I really enjoy it. And Amy Poehler has a cameo. They do a really good job with cameo work in Broad City. And Amy Poehler has a phenomenal cameo as a chef who's just like you're seeing her have to operate a kitchen and be like all put together and kind to her work staff, but she's fighting with her boyfriend slash husband or whatever who's a waiter at the same restaurant. So like you see him and he's like classic kind waiter, and then he comes back and they're just fucking squabbling the entire time, and it's so good to just see them. Okay, we're back to everything's okay. Like it's a lot of fun. But yeah, you're right. I think Amy Poehler's wildly underrated for Inside Out because everyone does such a good job playing almost to type in that movie for the emotions, and then she doesn't. So it's because when you say joy, I don't know if Amy Poehler would be my first immediate like. Oh, of course, Amy Poehler. She's a great choice, but I don't know if you said you have to cast the emotion joy. I don't know if Amy Poehler would be my first pick.
I definitely.
Whereas Lewis Black for anger, I'm like, yep.
Exactly.
Mindy Kaling for disgust, yep. Like, I get it. I get that a lot. 96 for me. It is the 10th highest grossing film of 2017 with $822.9 million. That is Wonder Woman. It's the most heartfelt and respectful rendition of a superhero that you can find, generally speaking. And the trench scene is still one of the most beautiful and satisfying scenes I've ever seen. The total construction of the movie, I'm not crazy about. The third act, specifically the final battle, it's a little tough.
The only downfall.
I wish the movie was a bit reversed, where the first act was a little bit weaker and the third act was really strong. But it's the polar opposite. It peaks. I will say the movie peaks at the no man's land sequence in the trench, and then you're kind of like, well, we've already gotten this, so what are we gonna get? And then it's kind of like heartfelt message fight at the end, but it's true to the character and it's true to what the character represents. So I still love it in a really big way, and it's just a really smart and intelligent movie. The way it presents a female superhero and the fact that she's still incredibly feminine, but she's not a stereotype of what people believe a female superhero should be. And I find it incredible. I still remember going to that theater and watching women all around me cry because they finally had, their representation of this character or a character like this on screen. And it was a very emotional ride to go through. And I still cry every time I see that trench sequence because it's just perfect to that character. Because that character means a lot to me as well as a DC fanboy. So I'm like, Patty Jenkins does a phenomenal job presenting her.
By far the best DC movie. I mean, in terms of DC.
Of that era, yeah.
Yeah.
Of the DCU, it's not much competes with it, let alone is even remotely.
And great chemistry between Chris Pine and Gal Gadot.
Very much so, and it was.
It's a shame that they kill him off, which they kind of have to like immediately back on that in the sequel. That's like.
Yeah, Wonder Woman 1984. I don't know if I've been. There's not many movies that have disappointed me more than Wonder Woman 1984. It's so bad. And I remember getting into. We watched it with two friends, and it was myself, Ab, and two friends during New Year's time. We watched it, and they're like, "Oh, what'd you think?" And I was like, "This movie sucked. This movie was awful." And they're like, "What? No." I'm like, "No, seriously." And now, as time's gone by, usually they're the friends that kind of double down on their opinion over time. They kind of get more solidified in their opinion. And there was this time it was no, yeah, you're right. That movie's not good. I'm like, I know it's not good.
It's bad.
But the original, Patty Jenkins does such a good job presenting that character and accentuating the positives that Gal Gadot can have in that role.
Yeah, because she's not the strongest actress, but she does well in it.
And and they do such a good job only presenting the positives that I have to give her credit for that. But again, tremendous film, great score, great music track, phenomenal period piece as well, and emotional ties. Great movie. Love it.
So I'm actually gonna combine my 95 and 94 because I pretty much have the same exact thing to say about them, even though they're two completely different movies.
Okay.
It's Get Out and Sideways
Okay.
because they're both just like incredibly intelligent scripts with like incredible casts. Like some of the smartest writing that you're gonna see, and then like the casts are just like at pretty much at the center of it. It's just like 4 or 5 people
Sure.
just playing off each other. It's really in Get Out, it's just that family plus Daniel Kaluuya,
Yeah.
and then and in Sideways, it's just Paul Giamatti, Thomas, or no, Hayden
Yeah,
Church,
Thomas
right?
Hayden Church, yeah.
And then Sandra Oh and Virginia Madsen, who both give like incredible performances. It's just those 4 people pretty much are moving, and then yeah, it's just pretty much like Sideways is like I don't even know if I'd call it a rom com. It's like a
Dramedy?
ro- yeah, pretty much. But it's like they're both just subversive, but in without being like too. You know how subversive can get to the point where it's just like annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it's just like it's too gritting and like too in your face about it.
Sure.
Where it's just like, yeah, we get what you're doing, and that's the annoying thing about it. Also, with Get Out, there's a lot of like things about that movie that I think are actually low key iconic, which is something that I mentioned it. I can't remember when I mentioned it. I mentioned it earlier in one of the episodes where Jordan Peele said the sunken place, where he was talking about the sunken place when they're filming it, and he said that shit's gonna be iconic.
Yes, I do remember.
Yeah, where he said the like the visual style of it is gonna be iconic, and it is. I would argue it actually is. Like him
And
falling into that like
call your
black,
shot when you can call your shot,
yeah,
brother.
like him falling into that black void of it is. I would argue, yeah, that probably is iconic at this point.
Get Out is remembered as. I don't think it's hyperbole to say this. In terms of our generation of moviegoers, movies released during our lifetime, many of our age group would say Get Out is a top 10 film made during our lifetime. And I think you're right when our age group would say, yeah, iconic. I
Yeah,
remember
and there's a lot of
I
like,
remember the drop into the sunken place just being so excited. I was like, "Oh, okay,
yeah,
this is going to be fun."
there's a lot of like smart little pieces of writing in there, like when they get pulled over by the cop when they hit deer,
Yeah.
and Allison Williams thinks she's being supportive of her black boyfriend, but really they don't. She doesn't want the cops to like have any record of him. And then when you rewatch it,
Yeah.
and then like when he says like, "Oh, there's black mold in the basement," this piece of writing, because really he's talking about the race part of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like great pieces of writing in.
Yeah. What a tremendous movie. Sideways I don't have that experience with, but I trust your word for it. I haven't
Yeah,
watched Sideways either. So I'll make that very clear.
both uh, nominated for Best Picture, and Get Out took home the original screenplay Oscar. And if I'm not mistaken, Sideways,
I think Sideways was
uh,
nominated, I recall.
I think it won adapted screenplay. I don't think it was. It definitely won screenplay, but I think it was adapted, not original.
Okay.
So
Fair
yeah,
enough. Fair enough. So I'll take you from two extremely well written movies to two that are not.
Okay.
So again, this is where you're gonna see the personal twists and turns, because most of these, the next one is gonna be an entry into the oh wow, that's a bad movie territory. 1999, 14th place, $222.1 million. It's Wild Wild West, baby.
Oh wow, that's a surprise.
It is.
That's on here.
So, listen to the blurb to get some context. A mess of getting jiggy with it, Will Smith, a classic Western and steampunk fever dream. Perfect for 6 to 7-year-old Evan who loves a Western motif.
The only thing I remember about that fucking movie, I should rewatch that movie actually. But the only thing I remember about
It's
that
fun,
movie
man. It's fun.
is
It's not good,
the
but it's
scene
fun.
is the scene where they have those collars and that like thing's gonna like cut off their heads.
Yeah.
That's the only part I remember.
It's a fun movie, man. It really is. It's not good. I want to make that very clear. It's not a good movie. And the
Oh, I
funniest
remember that being the case.
and the
Yeah.
funniest part is that for people, I think this is a pretty well-known story in movie circles at this point, but this is the movie Will Smith
The
took.
giant spider.
Well, this is the movie that Will Smith took to turn down The Matrix.
Yes.
He was supposed. They wanted Will Smith to be Neo, and
Oh, you should also talk about the Kevin Smith giant spider thing.
I will indeed. So this is the culmination of this was made through Warner Brothers, and John Peters, very very successful. I don't know how sometimes, but successful movie producer that started out as a hairdresser. And who was he dating? Was it Streisand or it? Not maybe I don't know. It was maybe it was Bette Midler. I don't know. One of the like classic divas. He dated her and kind of used that connection to get into the producing world, and then gained more power, and then banked on Tim Burton's Batman, and obviously that paid off, and that's what kind of fueled his power for a decade plus. So he's working with Warner Brothers, and he has this idea of a giant spider in a movie. And he doesn't pick his spot. He doesn't say, I think this would be great for this. Every movie that has anything to do with action, he just says, we need to have a giant spider. He just always says that. This giant spider was supposed to be in a Superman movie. When they cast Nicolas Cage, Tim Burton was supposed to direct. Kevin Smith wrote a draft of this movie because this is right after Clerks and Chasing Amy. And Mallrats. So everyone's like, oh, well, he's one of the new hot directors. Like, oh, and he's a comic book fan. He gets it. Like, you know this stuff. You write it. And he's just like, I don't know why you do that, but okay. And so, he gets to have Wet Dream. I get to write a Superman movie. To which Tim Burton's like, I don't remember that draft being in. I've never read it. I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan, but I've never read his draft of Superman Lives. And the whole thing was supposed to be Superman fights a giant spider. Like that was the big set piece at the end of the movie.
I just love that they just force it into whatever movie they can.
And John Peters was just a producer on this movie, and it just became giant spider, giant spider, giant spider. Here, obviously, I don't think it's a great inclusion, but at least they made it a motif. They made it something the villain.
They tried.
They tried to make it something worthwhile as opposed to, oh, it's the end of the movie, big action piece. What happens? Giant spider. Like this, they at least were like, well, let's make spiders a thing for him, and he has no legs, ergo, having more legs, through a mechanical means would be really interesting for that character.
Is it Rip Torn?
It's Kenneth Branagh. It's Kenneth Branagh.
Oh yeah, that's right. He just looks like Rip Torn.
A little bit, and Here's the thing. It's a great cast. It's Will
It's true, it
Smith,
is. Yeah.
Kevin Kline, Kenneth Branagh, and Selma Hayek.
Selma Hayek. Yeah.
And Selma Hayek's looking good, by the way.
Oh yeah, she looks great. Also, that I remember that. Remember the woman in the water tower with Will Smith? I
Yeah.
remember her being very attractive too.
Oh yeah. But it was. If you want to understand the '90s, go watch this movie.
Oh, it's bloated like crazy.
If you're someone, so I have a lot of coworkers that were born in the 2000s now. I'm old man at my job, and if anyone ever asks, like, what was the '90s like? Honestly, I'd say go watch Wild Wild West. That first scene in the
Yeah.
water tower, where he has a makeshift office slash bedroom in a water tower, and he's got a beautiful naked woman taking a bath with him in the water tower, and then it just drops into an action set piece and all this kind of stuff. It makes no sense, but it's just like, hey, our leading man's a ladies' man. Like, yeah, like that's the '90s to a T.
I'm just looking up if there's other bit players in here that are Emmett M. Walsh is in there. Ed Levine
Yeah, Ted
from
Levine's in this. Yeah,
yeah.
he's a
Okay.
good bit player in it. The thing is, this
Wow.
is it's one of those movies that you can't argue is good. This came to
Hmm.
me, and I adored this movie as a child, and it just so
Actually, while I'm
happens.
at it, I'll look up the Rotten Tomato score of it.
And it just so happens I found a partner who absolutely also loves Wild Wild West. So it's just a really fun pleasure movie for us from time to time. Be
What do
like,
you?
Wild Wild West.
What's your guess?
Are you talking about tomato meter for the critics, or are we talking the popcorn meter?
Critics. Critics.
Oh, critics. I'll go 43%.
16%,
16%. God damn. Here's the thing.
and then 28% on the audience.
That's low. Slow for that one.
Yes.
So the thing is, this is I thought it would be one of those movies where. Do you remember when we were going through some of those Rotten Tomato scores occasionally, and we'd be like, "It's got to be super low," and it'd be like really high, in comparative to what
Phantom
we
Menace
thought.
is like that.
Yeah. So that's why I was
Or it
like,
should be way lower.
so that's why I said I was like, I'm gonna go 43, not because I think it deserves a 43, but because I think things are worse than they actually are in ratings systems, but I fucking love Wild Wild West. It's a hugely problematic movie, but I love it and I enjoy it. And from there, we're going to go to a movie that I would say is right down the middle. It's about writing, but it's not good writing. It'd be 2015's 48th highest grossing movie of the year with $158.3 million. It's Goosebumps starring Jack Black. I love this movie.
I still have not seen it.
So here's what I say. It honestly captures a bit of the magic of the old TV show that we loved. And it's silly, spooky fun, and Jack Black is a fun cinematic version of R.L. Stine. I think it captures some of the magic of a TV show that we loved. That's why I love it. I can't say this is a great movie. It's a fun little coming of age movie set in the Goosebumps world with Goosebumps monsters. It's fun.
I own it too. I'm just gonna look at who the studio is.
It's Sony Pictures.
Oh, Sony. Okay.
Because I remember the Sony animation logo beforehand, or like intro
Okay.
to it. It's a fun little movie. It's a passable 100 plus minutes, I want to say. I don't know if it hits the 2 hour mark. It might, because
It
most,
probably doesn't.
but it's just Jack Black getting to be Jack Black as R.L. Stine. So it's just fun.
Let's. I have a question for you though.
Yeah.
Is it better than your favorite episode of the TV?
Better by what context?
Your favorite is just in terms of whatever you think is.
I enjoy this. I think the movie is better than my favorite episodes, which would be the two-parter of Welcome to Dead House. Haunted Mask is pretty good. That
Quantum
two-parter.
Max, that's my favorite.
I like the Phantom of the Opera episode, but that's one of the thing is everyone remembers the big two-parters. They never remember like the single
Yeah.
episode ones. I went through and watched a couple of single episode ones because I was like, you know what? I just love Goosebumps. Fuck it. Just Goosebumps were the only books that I could pick up and at least attempt to read in earnest. Because I never read as a kid. I'm still dealing with that problem today. You know, reading. I'm teaching myself to read on a more regular basis, essentially, because reading was not something that was appreciated in our household. To the point where this is not a good parenting tip. Anyone who's listening, so please don't do this. Anytime I even expressed interest in a book, our father has a tendency to be practical almost to a fault. To where he's like, why would we buy books? You're never going to read them. Like, knowing my tendencies, he's like, you won't read them. And I was just like, and I know how problematic that is working with children, where if you see a kid struggling to read, you don't say, well, just don't make them read then. You you invest in that opportunity to try to find something for them to read that they like. You don't just go,
Yeah.
why waste the money? You're never going to read it anyways.
I do remember him buying me books though, because I actually did read.
Yeah. And that was the problem. I was just like, oh, so we're just double downing that Evans is not a reader. Okay. To the point where I remember he fought me tooth and nail when I first became a comic book fan. When we go up to Barnes & Noble up in Appleton, he's just like, why do you want to go to Barnes & Noble? I was like, I want to look at the graphic novel section. He's just like, you don't read? I was just like, what the fuck? But I remember the side eye, like, you don't read? I was like, it's fucking Batman. Of course I'm going to read Batman. And that's what got me to read was comic books. But yeah, don't do that as a parent. Foster the love of reading. And when your kid's struggling, find a way for them to love it. It's a pretty useful skill. And the thing is this, I'm a great reader in terms of comprehension, but I'm the world's slowest reader. I was in a reading specialty room as a kid, I fully admit to that, because of speed, not because of comprehension or difficulty reading. So, yeah, don't do that to your child. And Goosebumps is a way for me to at least try as a kid. I would try to read a Goosebumps book. So they do hold a special place in my heart. Plus, I remember loving that TV show. It was a great Fox Kids entry. And I remember you going to the library and picking up VHS tapes all the time when we had the chance to. It was just fun to get to live those times. So it's a very heartfelt one for me at 94. Take us to your 93.
My 93, we don't even have to talk about it because we did a full episode on it, is The Burbs.
The Burbs. You know what? We're not going to go into that one super much now because it'll be much higher on my list. But I adore The Burbs. It is one of the best things a friend of our mother has ever introduced to me. Our mom's friend Tanya, who I don't even know if mom's still in contact with, even in the slightest, introduced me to that movie on an overnight trip to Marshfield, Wisconsin, to see our grandmother. And I went alone because Dylan was always hiding in his room to not go. And I watched The Burbs for the first time, and I fell in love. And I just went, this movie's fucking awesome. And shout out to Tanya. She took me to Return of the King, because my dad and mom did not want to take me to Return of the King. She took me to Return of the King. So props to you, Tanya. Still love you for that. But yeah, Burbs is great. I'll talk about The Burbs later on. 93. We're going to 1984. $38.4 million at the box office, 21st that year. The original Red Dawn. I fucking love that movie. A ridiculous 80s coming-of-age survival story, which is way more rad than it has any business being. Wolverines! I fucking love Red Dawn. It is...
It's okay.
I love survival stories. I love coming-of-age stories. And then you can put it in the context of young kids becoming essentially special detachment of the military by themselves. It's just intriguing and fun. I also love post-apocalyptic stories. You know this about me. I love that genre, and to get that mix with all these really talented young people at the
Yeah, I was
time.
about to say they like struck gold in terms of like actors.
Well, I mean, in that film, you have Patrick Swayze, Thomas C. Howell, Charlie Sheen, Jennifer Grey, and oh god,
Leah Thompson.
yeah, Leah Thompson. Thank you. I was blanking on Leah Thompson. Like that cast is just stacked.
Yeah.
And then
And you have
Harry Stanton's the dad.
yeah,
Like
I was about to say Harry Dean Stanton.
it's a stacked cast of young people. That's the one thing I've always gravitated towards 80s movies is they really started to learn how to make movies for young people with talented young and giving opportunities to talented young actors in a wide range, not just like, oh, we need a kid in this movie. They really focused on that age group, and it's something I've always loved and appreciated about the 80s. So I admittedly, I think John Milius is a hyper problematic director by his beliefs half the time, but he has a twofer in the 80s that I fucking love. So I gotta give it to him.
Apparently this movie was supposed to be a anti-war movie. Did you know that?
I don't know how you get that message.
No, it was supposed to be, and then the producer and John Milius just took it over and just completely turned it into like complete propaganda.
Oh, it's the thing is this is I do think by the end of the movie they do a good job showing the horrors of war. And
Sure.
so if you want to say it
But
was
it is like
I can see why it was supposed to be an anti-war movie. Like, oh, well, look what it does, warping the youth, warping people's thought
it
process
is
and
no
beliefs.
platoon in terms of the horrors of war, though.
But half the time you're getting the like classic American cheery propaganda music every time they
Yes,
make an attack. And it's just Wolverines with like great
exactly.
cheering music, and you're just like, I don't, I'm not sure this is a great message. Like this
Yeah.
is one of those things that if I had an impressionable child, I think I'd probably keep Red Dawn on the back burner until like their mid 20s, where I'd
No,
just be
I
like,
hadn't
I
seen it.
love this movie, but maybe not right now. Like I
Yeah,
don't want you doing
I saw
half
it
the
for the
shit.
first time. I think last year.
It's again, it's one of those movies I always heard about in the 80s. I always tracked down 80s movies, and I watched and I went, I fucking love this movie, and I watch it a lot,
Yeah,
admittedly.
it is fun.
It's a fun movie nonetheless. So that is my 93rd entry into the list.
Right. I-92 is from 1940. It's the Philadelphia Story,
Oh, wow.
directed by George Cukor. It's I can't say one of the original screwball comedies because there was like a million of those being made around that time. It's just like one of the best iconic screwball comedy of like rom-coms. It's got a great love triangle in there with Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn, and Jimmy Stewart. It's like
That's a
three of
stacked
the
that's a stacked 3 right there, dude.
yeah, exactly. It's like three of the most iconic like Hollywood golden era stars. Jimmy Stewart won the Oscar for Best Actor in there. It also took home the screenplay Oscar back when they didn't separate like adapted screenplay and original
Original.
screenplay. It was just screenplay. That's it.
I kind of dig that, but I think that's problematic, so
But yeah, but they also just did. I think it was just called. It was like screenplay Oscar and then story Oscar, something like that. It was like two separate. It's weird how they used to do it.
huh.
Yeah, it was a nominated for Best Picture. It's just a lot of fun. Like Cary Grant's like pulling the strings a lot in the movie. Katharine Hepburn is not someone who I really used to love, and when I've been watching all the Best Picture nominees, I really started falling in love with her because she like has so much range. Like, because I always used to view her as I don't know if you've seen it, but Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, where she plays like this patriarchal, like old biddy, like that's
I think it's tough because you still see those stars pop up even into the 70s of
yeah,
in prominent roles, and you know the name, but you don't really know anything about their career. You just know the name. Like I
yeah,
don't know if I've actually sat and watched a Katharine Hepburn movie, but I know
yeah,
Katharine Hepburn.
yeah, and she's still like being nominated for Oscars in '80s with On Golden Pond and stuff, and it's like she just seems overrated at that point, kind of like Meryl Streep, where it's just like
Oh, Katharine did some work this year. We have to nominate Katharine.
yeah, it seems like that, but then when you actually go back and watch her, you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. She was like one of the greatest of all time. Yeah, you when you actually go back and watch all the ones, you get to see how versatile she is, and it's really fun to watch her and Cary Grant together because Cary Grant is like this. First off, his life is absolutely bonkers in vaudeville, and he's like doing trapeze and all these weird ass like acrobatics and shit. Like it's absolutely insane. And then he like Catherine Hepburn how to do it on set and shit. So like yeah, it's insane.
Never would happen on
Um
an insurance based
oh
movie
yeah,
of
definitely
today.
not. Like they had movies together where they're doing it in the movie and stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And then if we ever do like top 10 actors, you'll see on there for me. Like maybe in the top 3.
Oh wow.
Maybe even number 1. I don't know.
Okay, well I'm excited to get to that show eventually. Now, I mean, I think a cast sells that movie on itself. I have yet to see a Philadelphia Story. I do try to track down black and white movies. I just have to be in the mood to do that.
It's on my Voodoo if you want to watch.
I will probably do so. And if not that, I will say shout out to I hate to give a corporation a shout out here, but Max does a pretty good job with the Turner Classic Movies library, making sure that they're
Yes.
constantly keeping older movies in rotation. And if they even hint, if they even sniff that you might be interested in it, they pub it a lot, which I
They're
appreciate. They should.
they're they're the one streaming service that I actually do appreciate for having classic.
Yeah.
Like every other one doesn't give a shit.
If they do it, it's like a seasonal or it's a, well, this is topical. And you're like, no, motherfucker. Good movies are just good movies.
Yeah, other than the Criterion channel, but that's like their whole things. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I highly recommend that if anyone wants a big package. I think Max is probably the best package you can get for wanting to have normal television, great movies, and some classics and some other stuff. I'd probably give it to Max. But that's not the topic here. My number 92, not nearly as old. It's 2004. It's the 17th highest grossing film of the year, $235.2 million at the box office. I I would assume I'd have to go through the list again. The most recent addition by far to this list, and it's Howl's Moving Castle. I I've yet I all due respect, I have an English teacher in high school that ruined dub movies for me, or original language movies with subtitles. I hate subtitles, and she just pissed me off even more with it, so I can't do it.
It's the only way I can watch them.
So I did watch the dubbed version, and the English voice cast is fucking incredible, by the way, for
Yes,
Howl's
I
Moving
will
Castle.
give that they're very good at doing that. All the Studio Ghibli movies,
Yeah.
they do go all out with their American cast.
I mean, the American cast for Howl's Moving Castle: Christian Bale, Lauren Bacall, Billy Crystal. This is a great fucking cast.
Yeah.
So again, gorgeous visuals meet a heartening story of friendship and love with tremendous messaging behind it. This is a great anti-war movie as well, which I adore. but it's also this very intriguing story about magic and a magician and how to use your powers and what you use your powers for, the cost of what you're doing. There's tremendous messaging in this movie as well. So if we're going to go the inside out route, I really do appreciate the message behind this. But again, it's some of the most gorgeous visual animation you could see in a movie. And
Yeah, I've
oh,
only seen this one once. I do remember really liking it, but I just didn't really connect to it like I did with Spirited Away.
okay.
But I do know that I actually forgot to mention this in the Oscars review that we did for this year, but this has one of the scores that like gets mentioned over and over again because I know it has that famous song that I always hear like people talk about like crazy. 'Cause it has like this iconic piano piece. I think it's like Merry Go Round or something. Merry Go Round of I don't know what it's called. Something Merry Go Round. I'll look it up just so I can get it right.
I mean,
Uh,
the music,
but it has
which is phenomenal in this
yeah,
film.
yeah, it's like an iconic song that everyone loves from that movie. Merry Go Round of Life. That's what it is.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know that piece that you're speaking.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous movie. And I will say, this is a great. I'm just dipping my toe into Studio Ghibli. I've watched half of Spirited Away, and it wasn't Spirited Away's fault, but I fell asleep because I was stubborn and I was like, oh, it's 1 a.m. I could still watch a new movie, and I fell asleep on the couch. But that was Moving Castle. I just went, this is the one that's always visually intrigued me enough for me to maybe take a run at this. And I didn't know anything about the voice cast. I just went, okay, it's Studio Ghibli. It's supposed to be really good.
Yeah.
I'll watch it. And then I was like, I know that voice. What do I was like, oh, I got fucking Batman here. Plus, I had Lauren Bacall, and I
Also,
was like, holy shit, this is amazing.
the thing I really do appreciate about Studio Ghibli is like they don't sanitize their movies
No.
like American studios do with their animation, where it's like they're not afraid to go kind of dark,
Yeah.
which is something that Disney used to not be afraid to do. Like they would go a little bit dark at times, but now everything's like so sanitized to the point where it's just like, okay, we can't go dark at all. And also
Yeah.
Studio Ghibli's not afraid to go weird. Like some of their stuff is like out there, and I love that shit.
Well, one, it's weird. Two, they have a lot of basis in Japanese mythology. And when you do
Yeah.
your homework on Japanese mythology, especially to a Western, you know, society member, Japanese mythology is fucking weird. Like,
Yeah, but
weird
also it's
shit.
like there's stuff that's gonna go completely over the head of a child.
Yeah.
That means it's still gonna be rewarding for an adult, and it's gonna be rewarding for an adult to come back and rewatch stuff. You
I
come
mean,
back and rewatch it over and over again,
that is
so you
something that
understand it more.
it's something that I was reflecting on because there are not. I will be the first to admit there's not a lot of animation, almost at all, in my top 100, and it's mostly because there were movies I loved as a child, and I've gone back to rewatch them, and the vast majority of them that I loved, I kind of go, well, I still love it, but I don't think it's that great. Where it's exactly like you said, when you're not afraid to go to those darker emotional places or do things that in a way in which a kid's not going to immediately understand it and get the gravitas of it, but they can get it to the point where they can keep going with the movie, and an adult can get it, and then you can come back from a child into an adult and watch it. It's a super rewarding experience all over again.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm specifically thinking of like when the parents turn into pigs
Yeah.
in
Spirited
Spirited
Away.
Away.
Holy
That's
fuck.
pretty dark.
That's dark as
Like
shit.
it to a kid that either will be scary or it will be funny.
Yeah.
But like there's definitely like symbolism there for an adult to understand that a kid just won't.
Yeah. And it's
So
certainly a very interesting vibe, and that's what I love about Howl's Moving Castle. It doesn't pull punches. It's a fucking wartime movie, and I love that.
I definitely should go rewatch. 'Cause it's
Oh,
been a long time since.
Josh Hutcherson also is the is the young boy in that movie. So it's just great voice cast.
Yeah, he must be pretty young.
He's very young in that one, you can tell.
It must be the thorough times.
Yeah, it's right around the third times. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right, take us to your 91.
My 91 is Good Will Hunting.
All right.
I mean, there's one reason it's on this list. It's Robin Williams.
I knew it was coming.
I mean, it's like
I almost started a timer in my head of how fast is he going to get to Robin Williams in this.
I love Robin Williams so much. Like I actually when I said Jimmy Stewart might be my one, that's a lie. It's Robin Williams. He's my number one favorite actor of all time. There's no competition. It's like
You fucking love Robin Williams, dude.
he can do it all. He can be funny.
He can be
He
scary.
Like, just
He can be intimidating.
get down to like just like so emotional, and that's what it's so great about this movie is like there's like real heart-wrenching scenes with him and Matt Damon that are like they crush your soul at times. Like,
I've yet to see Good Will Hunting all the way through. I've seen so many clips of it. It's one of those eternal. I've seen so much of it that it keeps going down on the list of things to watch because I keep getting more and more of it.
Yeah, it's. I'd be curious to see what you would say about it, considering you've a lot of clips from it, because it's not. I think it's not what people expect. 'Cause you've probably seen the more famous scenes from it.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's like a lot of like weirder scenes where like Matt Damon's just beating the shit out of people. Like, he's just getting into the fist fights and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, a great cast with like that rounds out like Casey Affleck is in it. And Affleck, he's great in it, obviously. There's a great scene where Matt Damon doesn't want to go to a job interview, so he sends Ben Affleck in his place. And he's just like he's just like a dumb Boston guy.
Yeah.
And he's trying to act like Matt Damon, who's like low-key in the movie.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, I have seen the scene in which Ben Affleck is very self-aware as a character in that movie. He's just like, I'm just a fucking guy from Boston. You're a goddamn genius. And it's very clear. He's just like, you have way more potential in this world than anybody.
Yes.
You won't take it.
It's a great scene.
It's a great scene.
And considering how young they were, it's amazing the amount of depth that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck have in their writing. Like, they have to be in their young 20s, I'd say.
Oh, yeah.
When they wrote it. And yeah, I love that movie.
Also,
it's great.
Props to them for sticking by their guns on that movie. It's something I've always appreciated when they said, no, you're going to make this movie with us.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the only downfall is that it's a mirror.
Yep. But at the same time, that it's just something I've always really appreciated. The fact that, like, no, this is our shot. This is our chance. This is ours. You're not going to do it without us. Because apparently, Miramax wanted to do it with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire.
I could see that. But, I mean, that's the thing is, like, they didn't want to be writers. They wanted to be actors.
Yeah.
So, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
And half the time, that's what people do. They need to write stuff that they can be in so they can get a big break.
Yeah, and good for them for doing it. And the world of movies is better because they did that.
Yeah. And Robin Williams gives a great Oscar speech where he thanks them.
Yeah.
It's great.
Good movie nonetheless, I'm sure. But I'll take you to something wildly different in number 91. For my number 91, 2008, it's the 54th highest grossing film of the year.
It's guy.
It's Step Brothers, baby.
Oh, actually, I'm surprised it did so bad.
I was a little surprised as well because it's a perfect buddy cop movie for the teenager that I was. And it's not even a cop movie, but it's essentially, that's the way it is kind of told, is through buddies. It still holds up because it's just fucking ridiculous. And did we just become best friends? It's just there's so many quotable lines from that movie.
Yeah.
What are you
It's
doing?
like a
I'm burying you.
yeah, it's a haters to lovers love story and but with friends.
Yes. And when you're saying, well, "Wow, I'm shocked it was that low," this is the perfect era to explain why home video it sucks that it's no longer a thing.
Yeah.
Because Step Brothers on its own was a fun movie for the year. People could have been like, "Oh, that's cool. I really thought that was funny." But it took on a life of its own once it got to
Yeah.
home video, where our age group devoured Step Brothers, where it was
Oh yeah.
you
I mean
couldn't
that
you couldn't get past it.
I was gonna say that movie was like inescapable. Like it was like Borat level where like people were quoting it
Oh,
everywhere.
oh yeah, and that's where people don't understand comedy most of the time. The second run is way more important. That's what makes the comedy movie what it is. Because we don't have that anymore. But it used to be, it'd go out into the theater. If it was popular people, it'd usually make a good chunk of change back, especially because they're usually cheaper to make. And then in the second run in home video, that's when it would just steamroll. And it became part of the zeitgeist of a culture. Now, without that, you don't have that. Step Brothers is one of the last great ones to get that. Where I'm just thinking in a Netflix streaming world, if any movie's ever really gotten that ever again.
No, because they just go on they just get dumped on streaming services and then
And no one cares because
die
it's a
there.
streaming service movie.
Yeah.
And it's a and rightfully so in my opinion. There's a lot of people such as myself. I know it's funny for me to say my opinion's right, but I think this is a well shared opinion by many people. When you see something as a streaming service exclusive or it was made for a streaming service, you immediately just go, it's not going to be worth my time. So you don't do it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Because most of the time, that's what it is. So I don't want to go in
Yeah.
my old Netflix original used to mean something, and now it means the polar opposite. But
Well,
that's
they make so much that it's just like a deluge of shit.
oh yeah, I know, and that's where I remember it was a big deal in the transition period to get one of these movies onto a streaming service. You'd be like, oh shit, they got that. I have to watch that. Like the only one that still kind of does that is Peacock, because Peacock doesn't do a ton of original content.
Yeah.
And they make a big deal of when they get a new release, they put it on. They make a big deal out of it. They're still making a big deal out of the fact that they had Oppenheimer.
That's true, yeah.
And but they do the same thing for the smaller comedy movies that still made it to theaters, and I always appreciate that. I just Will Ferrell with John C. Riley at their best, with a ton of fun
Honestly,
cameo work. It's great.
like every single scene in that movie,
Yeah,
like every scene.
there's something funny about every scene. Yes.
And then you got like great supporting cast with Adam Scott and Catherine Hahn, Richard Jenkins and Barry Steenburgen, and
Oh
like
yeah.
it's great. Even
It.
the little kids in the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Catherine Hahn is so good in that, and so
Yeah, she's great.
she's so good in that movie.
Uh, yeah,
The
good
scene
call.
where the scene where she just attacks Dale in the bathroom is so fucking funny. And just leaves with Stay Golden Pony Boy. And you're like, what? What? What does that even
Every
mean?
scene. It's
Boats and hoes, boats and hoes. Gotta hit me in my boats and hoes.
it's not often that you get movies like that where every single scene, like there's times when there's parts that are funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's from even the same
Yeah.
Will Ferrell movies, stuff like that. So
Great
it's
movie
great.
nonetheless. But that has been our 100 through 91. If you had to nominate one movie that someone hasn't seen from your top 10, what would it probably be?
From this batch,
Yeah.
well, I would urge people to go watch The Vanish because most people haven't even heard of it.
Fair. Fair. I think just from the picks that I have available to me, I think it'd be Edge of Tomorrow for me. No one went and saw that movie. The few people that did see that movie and I got a chance to talk to, they all love it. They all think it's great. So I would say Edge of Tomorrow would be my biggest recommendation from this list in terms of if you haven't seen it, go watch it. I think enough people have seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Howl's Moving Castle at this point. So that would be mine. But that has been 100 through 91. We'll be back with more stuff next week. Let me double check what we got on the docket here for you folks. On top of that, though, we will be back with another Top 100 episode next month. If I remember correctly, if my computer wants to load for me here, we may be going to big box office territory, and we're going to Spider-Man 2 next week. But it's either next week or the week after we go to Spider-Man 3. Because, not Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3. Because that is 2007's highest grossing film, and that was our random draw after Revenge of the Sith. So we're on a real quality kicker here of our big box office.
Great quality.
I know in March it picks up with The Sound of Music, so
Yeah, I'm fine with that one.
But we're going to Spider-Man 3 in the next couple of weeks. But if you want to see more content, stay tuned as much as possible. Get ready for the Oscars with us. We have the Oscar reviews coming up, and we're going to have some Oscar predictions this year, which should be a lot of fun. Some other things going on. But enjoy what you can from the show because we appreciate when you do. So thank you so much. Go watch a great movie. Peace, love, and hugs to you all. Goodbye.